Hello there.
Hello, how are you doing?
Hello. Yes, hi. I just welcome. Thank you. Just letting you know we're recording and it's going out live. Um, we're talking about different upbringing and how some people were brought up versus different ways of being brought up from perhaps maybe a unit or sometimes maybe a broken home, depending on circumstances. So I was asking what we watched a movie where the children were smacked with a, I'd say beaten with a belt or disciplined with a belt. How do you feel watching that scene of children being disciplined with a belt? I mean, that was particularly in church at the time, but relatable for home. How do you feel about how was you brought up versus how I was brought up and how I can resonate with other people being brought up about?
Well, in relation to the clip that you're talking about that we watched a while ago, it was slightly extreme with what we were watching a while ago. For me, I'm going to make this clear. What we were watching was the domination of church leaders using their powers over the congregation. And I'll use the word by force. So the children were being chastised, not even by their parents. They were being chastised by the pastor. Is that a fair assumption to make with what we were watching?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Fine. Now, because you specifically asked me about how I was brought up.
Can we just elaborate? It was about, in relation to spare the rod and spoil the child, is it?
Yeah, that was the phrase.
So it was into that phrase that actually I wanted to indulge a little bit more about that that phrase. Spare the rod and
spare the rod and spoil the child. The meaning I guess you're to take from it is, if you don't use the rod to correct the child will become spoilt and unruly. And you can take that in several different directions. More to answer the question you asked me how I was raised. I was raised in a two-parent family. I think that's important to say because I was. And I had a relatively normal life, but on the grounds of corporal punishment, if I can call it that. If my father had to beat me, he would beat me. Equally, if my mother had to beat me, she would beat me. Now, this is where it gets sticky. I was never beaten by my father or my mother because, one was drunk or one lost control or they were high on drink or drugs or any of that sort of thing. I was, and I'm going to change the word from beaten, I was chastised, I'm going to use the word chastised, for not doing as I was told. Misbehaving at school and getting a letter sent home, being disrespectful to the teacher when the last thing my father in particular told me every morning was go to school and keep your head down and don't be rude and learn your books. That's what he used to tell me every morning. So for me to go to school and then follow my friends because my friends found it funny to call the teacher fatty, or teacher, you smell, you did, and you go and you join that little group, and then the teacher leaves them alone and singles you out, you know, you then gonna pay the price. And I certainly paid the price more than once for following my friends. Jumping forward now to a grown adult with child of my own. I guess I'm going to cut it short to bring you back in, but if I had, how can I explain this? There were a lot of times, I'm going to be honest, there was a lot of times when I was young that I'm not going to say hated, because that's too strong. I despised my parents because I felt, well, you know, how comes any time I do anything, you've got to pull the belt on me? My friends don't get that treatment. My friends can walk in the house and do and say whatever they want. They can even cuss their parents. And it's all good. Their parents still love them, but you lot just want to seem to use the belt on me every 5 minutes. That was when I was a youngster, you know, 15, 16, living at home. Now I'm a grown adult with my own child and whatever. I realized the difference. I'm glad, and I'll be the first one to say I'm glad that I was raised the way that I was raised, because it taught me right from wrong. It kept me on the straight and narrow. I had a very strong sense of right and wrong. Like that clip, we were watching another clip, you'll probably elaborate more on that clip, where a young girl, schoolgirl in a school uniform, was being extremely rude to an adult lady, and they ended up getting into fisticuffs over it. As a child, that's something that I would have never have done. I would have never have confronted somebody that looked like my mum, through fear of, you know, oh, if I get caught, I'm going to get a whooping when I get home. This person might even know my mum, and so on and so forth. I was glad I had that upbringing. Didn't like it at the time, but now as an adult, personally, I'm speaking for me, I can see the benefits of the way that I was raised, as opposed to some of my friends that didn't have the upbringing that I had, and their lives haven't turned out the way that my life is. And I'm not suggesting that, hey, I'm this big high flyer and stuff. I'm not, but I didn't go down the route of drink and drugs and in and out of prison and all this sort of, from a very young age. I never had anything like that. But simply, again, because I knew what the boundaries were.
So I would say your household was kept in order, in line with consequences.
Yes, very much so.
So would you impose those consequences on your own? I mean, your child is an adult now. Would you have thought of imposing those consequences on your own child? How did you manage the difference?
Right. Good question. Good question. The first question: would I put those on my child? Yes. Did I put those on my child? Yes. Did it work? Gonna have to say kind of yes and no to that one. The reason being, from a very early age, my son's mum and I parted company. So
I just wanted to clarify, because it might sound peculiar that you've got this. My question may be a bit wrong, so I just want to elaborate.
oh, go on.
What I was talking about, the way that you were disciplined by your parents, where you use terminology beat, or disciplined with a belt, yes. So would you have ever done that to your own child? That's what I'm asking.
Yes, and I was in the process of answering that by, it might be slightly long-winded, but the answer to that question is yes, but no on the same scale. And the reason I'm saying yes and no, to confuse you, is that I parted company with my son's mum from a very young age. So it wasn't mother and father in the house, which is what I'm used to. I'm always used to mum and dad in the house, not this is all new to me. So what I found out very early on, which is going back to your original question, is that if the child done something wrong on a Monday at school, and I'm now coming to do my parental father bit on a Friday, and the mother says he got into trouble at school on Monday, for me to just come down on him like a ton of bricks, which I did in the beginning, caused problems, because I could see the child was resenting me from a very young age. Does that make sense? Yeah? You know, oh, here's my dad turn up. All my dad doing is just beating me when he turn up. And I think, or I thought, that I was doing the right thing, the parental thing. Yes? So I had to modify how I dealt with things. And I found that talking and allowing him to talk was far more productive than just getting the belt out and whacking 7 bells out of him, if that makes sense.
Well, you know, it's uncomfortable listening. I think, as if I'd like to compare that, I remember when my dad hit me with a belt. I think it's a culture thing. Back, if I have to be honest, I don't know. I mean, I have heard of stories how people are disciplined as children, but experiencing myself, it was the most uncomfortable thing ever to be disciplined by a belt enough to urinate on yourself because you are put the fear of God on you, you know? So I would be very uncomfortable in that way of, you know, in that way of discipline, because I have to say that it wasn't until I started watching Nanny 911, Joe Frost, I will name that, is that she taught a different way to gain law and order in your home. Yes. Without physically hurting your children. Yes. So it taught you another way that may not have been available growing up, because you learn something from your own children, you then pass that on. Sorry, you learn something from your own parents in the way to discipline, you then start passing that on pretty much to your own children until someone says it's wrong. When someone says it's wrong, that's generally might be social services that step in through the schools if your children have complained and said, look, you know, you can't do that. I mean, I remember one time, you know, I was told I smacked my children because that's what my father taught us to do to keep the house in order. Yeah. And the social services got involved with myself and asked me why have I smacked my child. And I said, because my father taught me that's how we have to discipline our house. It's culture. Mm. She said, well, you know, this is England. You can't do that here. And I said, well, nobody's actually ever taught me anything different. Where were you to protect me when it was happening to me? Mm-hmm. Or where were you when I was walking in the school with a cut on my head that my father had done. Where were you when I was being punched by my father? Where were you? You know? And now here you are telling me that I could possibly have investigation if I smack my children. Smack. We didn't say beat. We said smack.
Yeah.
And so it taught me there must be another way then, okay? Because these people are now telling me it's wrong. So all those years I've gone with being disciplined and corrected, etc. And you know, I had that little bit of intervention with my own children, and I had to find another way to, you know, correct them. So I mean, that in itself, it's quite difficult because you're replacing, which I consist of when I look now as an adult, because this is when we're younger. When I look as an adult, you're replacing that behavior, the way you discipline it, with a much more healthier approach without harming the child, you know. And I think when I look back now, for anybody that smacks their children or beats them with a bout or an object, I'm sorry, but I believe it's completely wrong, because they go on to then do this to women later on, or vice versa. Okay, but you've heard the statistics with women getting domestic abuse, and again, if what and men, and it's just that people want to keep their house in order, and that's the way they were taught to do it. You know, let's physically put a hand on someone to get them to do as they're told. So if it's not right for an adult, why would it be okay for a child?
I see your point on that. I'd like
if anybody smacked you with a belt, yeah, as an adult now, you know, we can't change history.
Right.
We can only improve on life.
Yeah.
But if somebody came and smacked you with a belt, what would you do with that belt?
Well, I would retaliate, wouldn't I?
Right. So what as a child, what defense does a child have?
Right. Well, okay. A child doesn't have any defense. The parent or parents are the defense.
Yeah,
but I think it's slightly digressing, because we've. All right.
I'm looking at what happened to you. I'm looking at the way what happened to myself. I'm looking at the fact that we became parents ourselves.
Right.
We're looking at the dilution of understanding what is right and what is wrong now.
Okay. Well, all right. For me, this is how I remember it all those many years ago. I'm in my bedroom, me and my brother, karate fighting, jumping on the bed and doing all sorts of nonsense. And my dad puts his head through the door and says, "Oi, stop that." Okay, Dad. Yeah, no worries. 2 minutes later, we're back on it again. And my dad was a kind of three talking person. He'd come back and say for the second time, "If I tell you to stop again, you're going to find out." Okay, Dad. All right. Yeah, we stop now. Shut the door. Me and my brother still pinching and punching as young children do at each other. And the third time the door comes flying open, you know, I'm going to grab my brother as a shield, and my brother's going to grab me as a shield, and we're going to get six of the best, to put it politely. How did I feel at that moment in time? Well, now my leg or my arm or my backside is sore, and I could have done without that. I now know that my dad's not messing around. He's not playing games. So I better behave myself, because if I do, this is what is going to happen. Yes. And this is why I say I can only speak for me. I know some horror stories where, you know, people were hit with objects. Yes, the belt was used on myself, but that was the only thing that was used on myself and my siblings. There was no other, you know, nobody never picked up an ashtray, or, you know, I was never burnt with any cigarette butts or any of the horror stories that you hear. And I certainly, in my opinion, that's why I would like to opinion, I was never chastised just for the hell of it. There was always a reason where I didn't do as I was required to do whatever it was I was meant to do. And going back to what you said about,
they couldn't exactly take your mobile phone off you, because in those days there wasn't one.
Exactly.
So I think, you know, when we look at that situation back in the day, a long time ago, early 70s, 80s, when we look about that situation, there wasn't really much to take off of you, or prevent you from going many places, as a way of disciplining. And
well, for me, keeping me indoors of that generation, like 70s child, that was the worst. Especially summertime, you can hear your friends outside riding on their bikes and in the swing park and all the rest of it, and you're stuck in the house. That was, and you see, this is something. It's a good point that you raised. So let me create the scene. Me and my brother now got our backside slapped from our father because we misbehaved. Hot summer's day, you would think that, you know, you've just had your backside smacked. So like, okay, now you've had your punishment, go off and go and have fun. No, it was the classic, and I believe this is a West Indian thing, go and get a book. So you've just been smacked for misbehaving in the house. The punishment doesn't go away. You've now got to go and read a book that you're not interested in, and you can still hear your friends outside playing. They're coming, knocking the door. Oh, you're coming out? And no, I'm not coming out. And so, yeah, for me, the punishment did extend by way of having to read about, you know, Mary Queen of Scots or whatever encyclopedia I had in the house at the time, whilst my friends are outside playing blissfully, without a care in the world, you know. But I still, as I said earlier, I still am happy I was raised that way, as opposed to being allowed to just.
That's the only way I'm sorry, but that's the only way. You don't know any different, so that's all you knew. You didn't know there was another life to being corrected.
Right. Well, hold on a second. I get your point, but I slightly disagree with you on that. And the reason I slightly disagree is because my friends were open about how they were being brought up. So that became subject of
kids laughing.
Yes, ridicule. You know, you better behave, or your daddy got to come to the school and beat you. Yeah, they used to try and put on a West Indian accent, because I went to school with a lot of white people. You know, and they used to tease you about it.
So why is it that you see the difference is where I say my white friends at school would get in trouble, but they wouldn't get about. You won't get any supper.
Right, now this is the thing. That seems to be the way that they were dealt with.
Do you feel that? Do you feel? Okay, let's break this down, because everybody's been dealt with in different ways. We get that.
Yeah.
Okay, so knowing right from wrong now, we can nurture better. But do you feel that? Let's talk about the differences in punishments back then. It would be, you're not getting any supper. Did you ever get that?
No, I never had that.
So what do you feel now if this was said in today's day? Right, I'm not feeding you. Do you feel that is blackmail?
I would say that's neglect.
It's neglect.
I would say that's full-on neglect. Although I understand the sentiment of it, it's the same thing as trying to prove a point. You know, you've done something wrong, so this is the consequence of it. But you know, in the modern society, a child in particular needs nourishment, and if you are deliberately withholding nourishment, then you're neglecting the child in question, aren't you? You know?
So even like, okay, I think when my kids were growing up, right, I said no Nintendo. I think it was back in the day.
Yeah, Nintendo.
No Nintendo.
Yeah.
And bed early, and I used to say to my children, if you get in trouble at school, you're going to be in trouble when you get home.
Yeah.
Meaning you'd have to go to bed early.
Mm.
I would I didn't like I wouldn't like the thought of withholding food for my children.
No.
No, because you know, but bed early, or I would, yeah, it was more the time. I would restrict their time.
Yes.
I felt so guilty because this is the thing as a mum, you know, you want them to have fun because you know what that feels like when, you know, they're in trouble. You don't want them to really be in trouble, but I used to feel so guilty. All the other kids are playing, and I've got to somehow discipline my children and tell them that the behavior is unacceptable. And all I think about is, right, okay, you can go to bed early and no, you're not going out and you're grounded. That was the word I learned. You're grounded. So yeah, sorry, I just got a message. So you're grounded. I think it's very difficult. I mean, I was a single mum raising 3 children, you know. It's very difficult shrugging off your heritage in the way you were brought up, you know, and
well, that's part of your moral fiber, isn't it?
It is, but having to learn a new ethic because somebody else of a different culture says it's wrong was just a bit of an eye-opener for me. And when I'm actually in this grown-up state now, and you've got your grandchildren, I couldn't begin to think, I don't even like it if they get in trouble, you know what I mean? It hurts.
Yeah, I think
talking's better, isn't it?
There's several factors. This is what I was leading on to earlier. I had to learn very early on that I was alienating myself from my son by being overtly too harsh with him. I became, to a certain extent, you know, I was being used by his mum.
Can I just interject there and say there is a lot of women that will think that wait till your dad comes home. Yeah. So when you go to pick up the child, if you are co-parenting somewhere along the line, when you go to pick up the child, mother reels off all the bad things that the child's done. The dad then has to become the discipliner. Now, I remember my son saying to me, I don't want to become the discipliner and the bad one. The child's not in my company when he or she is misbehaving. Why is it that the mother or the parent can't, you know, correct the child that's living under their roof? Why is it got to be that the father or the mother that hasn't been present in that child's life all week is then suddenly you've got to discipline them, so you become the bad ogre, really, and the punisher, the one that they should be fearful of. Do you want your child to be fearful of you and only see you in that light? So I can see where you're going, saying the mum wanted me to do that. That's because society led us to believe that wait till your dad comes home, and take care of that. So, you know, and it's not, you know, what we know now, it's not cool, but we didn't know no better. If I say that, we didn't. It was an old thing that's in a belief system that has been drummed and reinforced in us.
Well, because men were always seen as the head of the household. So
correct.
If you know anything go on, you wait till your dad come. If dad's not there, your grandfather is there. If your grandfather's not there, your uncle is there, and you know, and if they all go, then the big brother is the man of the house. It was always that sort of way. But I had to learn it the kind of hard way.
And the undermining, isn't it, that when you are co-parenting as well, one will say, look, as a way of he or she hasn't done their homework today, they haven't done it, they misbehaved, I'm taking away the, let's say, Nintendo or whatever the game is, as a way of, you know, disciplining them. And then 2 minutes later, you'll agree over the phone about doing that, and then mum can't stand it anymore, or dad, and make it equal. Mum will, hold hold on, mum or dad can't stand it anymore, so I'm going to make it equal, and one of them caves in and gives back the game, that there, how do you feel about that?
Well, what I was going to say is extremely sore subject, and I had that myself, and until I had to change lanes, change the rhetoric, and it encompasses everything that you've already just said. You know, you get the report, oh, he's done this at school today. Right, okay, well, then don't give him the PlayStation for the rest of the week. You know, come home tomorrow, ring them to find out what's going on. What are you doing? Have you finished your homework? No, I'm playing PlayStation. Well, how does that happen? I thought you weren't so, oh, mummy said I could have it. So what it then does is it draws you back into an argument that you certainly don't want with the kids.
But it undermines you,
yes.
Also makes you feel small.
Of course it does. Of course it does. And you know, now for me, I can't speak for another father, but I was in my son's life 100%. So I had him every weekend from day one up until just very recently. So my son knew kind of like, well, boy, weekend, I best be on point. And it got to the stage probably about age 8 or 9. That's how long this went on for. Remember, he's just 18 now. Yeah. So the first half of his life was very much me coming down on him, and then, you know, his mum giving him back the PlayStation because she wants a quiet life. And I, you know, as you do, you speak to people, you discuss. And somebody said, and I'll be honest, it was a man who said it to me in quite a forceful way. He sort of said, why are you entertaining that? I said, what do you mean? Is my son? He said, listen, when you've got your son is under your jurisdiction when he's at your place, yeah? When he's at his mum's place, his mum is the one to do the disciplining and all the rest of it, because you certainly can't do any other bits that you want. Like if you said you want to cut your son's hair a certain way, or you want your son to wear a certain outfit, there would be an issue with that. So why are you just on hand to be, you know, police every weekend? You're creating a dangerous barrier for you and your son. And when I sat down and looked at it, because of what we're saying the following day, the punishment's gone out the window. So it makes no sense. You just don't want to deal with it. So I said, all right then. So a couple of weeks went on, another incident happened. I spoke to my son about the incident. I did speak to his mum, and she said, well, what are you going to do about it? I said, you know what I'm going to do about it? I'm going to allow you to deal with it how you see fit. Yeah? Because I'm sick and tired of saying to you, like I'm saying to you now, right, unplug the PlayStation and don't get back to him until this time next week. The week of no PlayStation is detrimental to a young child at that time. Yes? You go and give it back to him 15 minutes later, because you know, it's inherent that boys in particular will gravitate to their mum, just like young girls gravitate to their dad. So you can imagine, mum, please, 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 mum, I'll do the dishes, mum, please, I'll go and cut the lawn. I was the same. Yes? Please, mum, don't tell my dad I've got a letter home from school. Please, please, please. So I can understand how, you know, a mother who's had a long day, who now just wants to sit down and engross in TV and rest for a couple hours till it starts again, doesn't want to hear the moaning. But you see, when you do that, the child knows no boundaries. I know, I just got to butter my mum up and I'll be all right. And that's where I find a lot of mothers in particular go wrong. Too easy to just hand back. And before you know it, then you have issues where the child is 13 probably like my son, 6'2"
I'll
already.
weigh it up, be equal. It's not just mothers, it's fathers as well, because fathers are a soft touch. His fathers are a soft touch, mothers are a soft touch. It depends on the dynamics of the household. Depends how somebody is close to one or the other. So it's not a mother thing, it's a
But with my
it's a
experience,
parent. It's a parent.
my experience as a father, being in a group of fathers, I have never once, and I'm almost 50 years old, heard a man say, "Oh no, it's not like that for me. Oh no, it's the other way." I've never heard that. The story that I've just, I'm going to say story that I've just explained to you is the same story that I've heard from men time and time again. Every time I go there and tell her, don't give the boy the PlayStation if he's messing about. As soon as I turn my back, she go and give it to him. There's some element of truth in that. And the reason that is so crucial, because it gets to a point where the man reaches his breaking point. So you know what, I'm done with this. If you're not going to do, not what I'm telling you to do, you and I had an agreement. We spoke. It's in the interest of our child. The school not beating the children. You can't beat the child. I can't beat the child. Or you can't even raise your voice at your child now. So all you can do is to take his mobile phone and to take the PlayStation away. Cut him off from the outside world. Let him feel, and this is the thing, you know, the old-fashioned people used to say, if you can't hear, you will feel. Well, we used to feel with the belt on our backsides. Young people only feel now when they can't connect on Snapchat and all the different apps with their friends. That's how they feel. Yeah? But if you're going to do that for 15 minutes and think that that's going to make your child see different, personally, I believe you're mistaken. You know?
Do you think talking is a better way forward now? Because, you know, I think back, and I'm being fair, giving a fair count of people that may have been or heard this story, hearing this story, and said, you know what, I was there. It didn't hurt me when my dad beat me, but maybe you've never experienced domestic abuse, because this is where it came from in the first place. Yeah. So who knows? But my point, to be fair, you know, it isn't easy raising children. And yes, we give in because of the guilt situation. We feel guilty, and nobody has a manual to raising the children. We've been guided by schools, system people. Somebody has had input into telling you what to do with your child, you know, how to raise your child, what's in the best interest of the child. Somebody's had somewhat of an input, you know. But we talked about that very statement and how the churches can actually kind of brainwash you, you know, in a sense. And that old saying, spare the rod and spoil the child. I said, isn't it funny how people just take out of the Bible what suits them to assert authority? But it also says, you know, don't do to others that you don't want done to yourself. Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
All right. So, you know, isn't it when somebody wants to just say, you know, no, I'm right about this because it says it in the Bible. I believe at the end of the day, first, do no harm, you know, and it is harm that you're inflicting on someone if you're putting your physical hands on someone. You know, or an object on someone. And I stand against that all day long. As I said, many people will say, oh, it never hurt me. Was you beat up? I thought that, let's put it in this way. Let's put this in a concept, okay? You're a man, I'm a woman. You said it never hurt you. And I'll say, yeah, it bothered me. It hurt me. It hurt my pride. It hurt my ego. It hurt me. It left marks on me. It made me weed myself and urinate myself. And then I went on to accepting other men hitting me.
Right. Okay.
Because Daddy showed the way what abuse was to assert his authority,
Okay.
and Mummy had to adhere to that, or there would be consequences. So I, as a female, took on board that role of belief, and I guess that's why, you know, so many people end up in domestic abuse, because they're watching it. They're being conditioned.
Can I just address that then? Well, I'm completely the reverse of you. Obviously, being a man, when you say like, oh, you got beat and it hurt. Yes, it hurt me at that time when I got beaten. You know, the difference I would say in my situation is that when I was getting beaten, my mum was also involved in that. And when I say involved, I mean, she's now giving my dad the daily report on our behavior at school. And my dad is a man who will come in the house, and the first question he asks before he asks how you are is whether you behaved or not.
There it is, right there.
Whether you behaved or not at school, church, or wherever it was you were going. Yeah? And if the answer is no, you know, my mum say, oh, this one, he getting too big for his boots. And this. The next question is, what did I tell you this morning? So for me, it was very strategically done. But again, like the question I'm asking, what did I tell you this morning? Well, you know what he told you this morning. He told you to go to school or church and behave yourself. So if the report is coming back that you were running up and down the church aisle, or you was rude to Sister Johnson, or this, you're going to get your backside tanned. Now, that's what I meant about being in cahoots, you know, mum and dad. So mum's giving the report, you know, that you've done bad, and then dad is you know, tanning your backside. But again,
going back to the point of what we just said,
yeah,
about you didn't want to be the one that was schooling your child when you went to pick up the child.
Yeah,
you want to be the discipliner,
yes,
and that was what was happening here as well.
Yes,
Mum complained to dad.
Yes,
dad would come home and discipline.
Yeah, but the difference is my dad's always in the house. That was the one thing that I noticed. My dad was always in the house, so that kept us on the straight. Oh, not do that. You know, daddy would be checking, you know, so he was always on a tiptoe flex. The point that I was alluding to though is that it never disturbed me into my adult years where I would want to put my hands on somebody else because that's what I saw in the house. Like I said, the only time my father or my mother went for a belt was when we was out of order and disrespectful, and we were given ample warning. Do that again, and I'm going to cut your backside, you know, with the West Indian accent. That's how they used to say. Yeah? And so you were warned. It's no different now to a police officer stopping you saying you were doing 35 miles an hour in a 30 zone. You look like a nice young guy, so I'm going to let you go. But if I see you speeding again, I'm going to write you a parking ticket.
Well, that's different. That's not putting your hands on you, though, is it?
I know, but the principle, we're talking about consequences overall. There's got to be consequence. And what is happening nowadays is that there is no consequences. Okay.
That's because sometimes the fathers are not around, and sometimes the mothers don't want to give the fathers access either.
Yeah.
You know, so you've got that dynamic of a lot of single parents, a lot of co-parenting, a lot of parents fighting to see their children. You know, you've got that. Some people using the system to pay back the partners, etc. You know, and the child caught up in the middle of it all. And I believe at the end of the day, there's some big unhealthy communities out there that haven't got their act together, and the child suffers. Has maybe have learned something, had a breaking down family, and there's no family unit there to guide them in the correct way to help them manage their children.
Yep.
I believe at the end of the day, people are too much in their phones. They're too busy in their own love lives, but they're not fixed their even their own home issues yet. The stability is not there. It's more of a struggle. There's a lot of domineering when it comes to a child in the middle, being used as a weapon. And then you've got some children that are brought up in a very stable home. They're the lucky ones, right? Okay. But when we're going to get to the nitty gritty, I personally don't believe that putting a hand on anybody, on a children, is the right way to do it. And I think if we found other methods to communicate effectively, to educate, we wouldn't be so, you could dilute this. I believe you could dilute the domestic abuse, and the bullying so much, because people are just using to assert their authority to gain control. And that's the part we're teaching bullying. We're teaching, if you don't do as you're told, this is what's going to happen. There must be a better way to educate than putting your hands or object on children. And as I said, children or adult, if you don't want it as an adult, then why would you do it to your children? Why would you do it to your child? A smack about anything? Why? And I say that now because I've been educated that it's wrong. And if anyone wants to say it's not wrong, well, sorry. If it's not wrong, then please don't complain when your grown-ass son or daughter gets smacked by somebody else, because you're teaching that it's okay to put your hands on one another, and it's wrong. It's just wrong. If I could rewind the clock and my parents sat me down and spoke to me, and perhaps gave me time with education as well, and not offloaded me to other people, perhaps at the end of the day, I would have had more education, more success, and been not so troubled, But it's not saying that you feel loved when you're being smacked. That's not love. And many people think that being smacked, you grow into being loved. And that's where the domestic abuse comes into it. So I don't like the idea of children being disciplined in that manner. I believe that you can sit down, come to their level, and if you're struggling, actually book someone to help you with your children. Like I said, watch Joe Frost, and I say that because the techniques that she's used, I ended up using myself. Even if I was looking after somebody else's children, I would use those techniques until the child calmed down. And it's pretty much not getting into heated arguments with children and keeping your cool, no matter how much you're tested, and finding the beauty of how to educate them without fear. Are you going to be approachable? Is a child going to approach you when there's an issue, or are they going to fear you? Are they going to be believed? Whole heap of things. But
there's lots of things.
But the experience growing up in the BAME community was one of a unique. Looking back now, I don't blame any of them. I blame the lack of education. And also definitely not going to blame, because if I talk about when we were back at school, it was the school teachers. It was the headmaster that used to beat us with a cane.
Right. Can I just jump in there? When you say lack of education, I don't believe it's a lack of education. What it was, which you've just pointed out, it's the system.
It was the system. What the system was, the belief.
The headmasters. Well, forget the police for a minute.
I said the belief.
Oh, right. Sorry, I thought you said the police. The headmasters had the authority from government that they could whack you on the back of your legs or the back of your knuckles with the ruler or the cane. Did
you ever get the ruler?
Luckily, I joined my school the year after it was abolished. It was abolished the year before. So I was quite fortunate, but many of my friends, one year and above me.
I got it.
told me that, you know, they got the cane at school. Now, something that I was watching the other night was about prisons, and up until 19, I believe 69, you could still be flogged, which is the correct term for it, okay? Like, if you, whatever your sentence was, you could be given 10 lashes. And that's here in the UK, 1969, okay? My parents came mid-60s. So that meant that, you know, if you were arrested and convicted of a crime, pretty much like today we do community service, you could have been given 50 lashes here in the UK. So it was part of the system. We also had borsals for boys and girls, juveniles, you know, and we know that they were beaten and chastised in those establishments. And then as time has gone on, those components have been removed. So it's now classed as inhumane to flog somebody in prison. Headmasters and teachers can't discipline the child. Even as we speak, now in Scotland, it's now an offence to beat your child in Scotland. It's not quite here yet, but it's coming. They announced that earlier on this year. So you cannot...
I think. I'm sorry. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. Because I'm against domestic. I'm against abuse. Full stop. So I'm going to agree with people that are putting those orders in, only because I know, and I look back how much destruction it caused. If I'm going to tell a story about my parents, it's not right. It's not nice. Oh, my dad used to beat me. It sounds. You simplify it. You simplify it because you love them and you simplify it. But if I look now, and as a child now, I wouldn't want to go through it. Of course I wouldn't. I'm against abuse. So it might not have been recognised as abuse. It might be recognised as just, I'm just disciplining my child. Yeah, of course that was like that. But I think people just need to find a better way to connect with their children and find a healthier way to.
The thing that gets me is that's all well and good, finding a healthier way to connect, but like the video we watched earlier, you have a 14, I say 14 or 15-year-old in public talking to somebody who's probably the same age as her own mother or older, with no respect. None whatsoever.
Oh, I didn't see her screaming and shouting. I saw her defending herself and arguing. Sorry, for viewers that are listening to this, there was a clip played. I saw a schoolgirl having a bit of a dispute with an elder lady, probably saying, well, what, you're not my mother or whatever, but we don't know the beginning of it. You only got the middle of it. But the lady lost control and she hit somebody else's child. So the child did swipe back. I guess that's an instant reaction for being hit. The child did hit back, but you know, that's someone else's child. So the woman was wrong for putting her hands on somebody else's child, full stop. If we were taught back in the olden days that you wouldn't just get in trouble off your parents if anybody, your elders or your neighbours or your mum and dad's friends saw you out in the street and you were misbehaving, it was okay back then for the elders to step in. Some of the people haven't lost that ethic to, if you see the younger youth of the day misbehaving, to discipline them. Some of the people haven't lost that ethic, and some people do get involved. And then nowadays these teenagers are bringing out knives on people and not caring in the world about anyone challenging or chastising them. They're just, it's just like they're growing up before time. Either we're getting older and seeing things because technology's there, but has it always been there?
No, it's not that we're getting older before our time. It's a simple fact of the matter that the way that you and I were raised, yes, is different from how children are being raised. So when we're being raised, you're told to come home at this time, be home at this time. You knew there was a consequence. Your father don't beat you, your mother don't beat you. Now,
so I'll back that off differently because we were caught up.
Hold on, let me finish what I'm saying first. Now, a child does not have any boundaries to conform to. There is no boundaries for a child to conform to. Meaning that if the child decides, you know what, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to get up and go outside. You, as the parent, paying the rent and feed and food and clothing this child, you have no say or no restriction over the child. Because the child already knows that if you, as the parent, push the envelope, like that lady did in the video we watched earlier, they could be subject to being prosecuted for child neglect, cruelty, assault, whatever it may be. So children have learned to play the system to suit themselves. What that has done, in my opinion only, is it has made parents reluctant to even attempt to discipline their children. What am I going to bother for? They're only going to call the police and the police are going to end up nicking me, and then the child's going to keep it. So you know what? That's what he's going to do. Let him get on with it. Let her get on with it. They'll find out sooner or later. And that is why, remember, we watched another video a few weeks ago with 2 young boys assaulting an officer of the law, throwing him to the ground and kicking him, in his head and his upper torso before running off. Again, in their school uniform. In their school uniform. Yeah. I'm not condoning their behavior to say, like, if they were in plain clothes, it wouldn't have been so bad, but at least they wouldn't have been identifiable. This is how far the situation has gone the other way. And the chap that put the video on earlier on tonight, I won't call his name, but he said something important. He said, my mum used to tell me, when you leave the house, you're representing our family name, my name. Yeah. And that is critical. And I agree exactly with what he said there. And for me, my dad used to say the same thing, and equally the same thing with the school. Because if I'm wearing the school crest and the school tie, and that's the behavior that I've just gone and done, then what that looks like to any prospective parents is that, oh, the boys from that school, that's how they behave. They beat up the police. You see? And we had a debate about this in another group, and the rhetoric was, which kind of falls back into what you're saying quite nicely, is, well, if that was my child and I saw that, I'd go to prison. And it's just like, well,
you're condoning the behaviour.
You're condoning the behaviour.
So what advice, I'm going to wrap this up now, what advice would you give to anyone now? Now you know better, now you've seen the world, you know the education, you know you've seen children, right? Adults at their worst,
right.
Best.
Right, okay. What I would suggest is talk to the child. But when I say talk, I mean talk firm. Yeah. I'm naturally a very stern person, so it's easy for me to say. But if you're going to go in there namby-pamby, no, I never put my hands on my son. I used to talk to him very sternly, but I gave him the opportunity to talk and explain, something that I never had. So if the teacher ring home and say he done this, I ask him, what happened? And
give an opportunity then.
Opportunity to talk. Let's hear, because we all, and this is the thing, I think, especially in the West Indian community, the teacher, the pastor is always right, no matter what. And for me, I've seen firsthand that is not always the case.
No.
So I don't now want to go and beat my son because the teacher said he did this. That it's automatic beating. In my day it was. Now I try to change that, and I speak to him and find out if my son is wrong. Then I say, well, look, you're wrong, and you know that there's a punishment coming, and that punishment is X, Y, Z. Okay, spoken to your mum. That's how we're going to run it. If my son is questionable, I will go and say to the teacher, look, you say my son done this, but when I spoke to my son, this is whatever. And I think I was quite fortunate in my absence from my son, i.e. not living with him 24/7, I developed a good talking relationship with him. So I could always talk to him. Does that make sense what I'm saying? And oddly enough, without going into it too much, my son would call me, which I found strange. If he got something on his mind, he will call me and talk about it as before he talked to his mum. Yeah. Whereas with me growing up, even now, I wouldn't talk to, and my dad's in his 80s, I wouldn't talk to my dad about certain things because he still has that old-fashioned mentality.
Still look for the guidance.
Yeah. That's foolishness. That's foolishness. But I'm glad, and I always left that door open. I said to my son as well, and I think that times are different. Times are really, really, really different. Look at all the things we've got to
compete with.
Yeah, to compete with, like
because of the mobile phones, the technology.
Yeah. What are you going to do now if your son come home and tell you he's gay? In these times, in 70s and 80s, you laughed that off. Go and grow some muscles, boy, or go and drink a pint of Guinness or something. Now you can't do that. Yeah, you can't do that now. You have to be more inclusive with your children and give them various support. But I do believe, as much as I'm saying that, children do need certain consequences. So if your child is playing up, and you've got to be consistent. Don't be harsh today and then tomorrow I get away with it and wishy-washy. You've got to be consistent. You've got to be consistent. If you're taking the PlayStation or you're grounded, as you said, you're grounded for a month, then make it be a month and not 1 day less. Next time you go and do something, grounded for 2 months. Make it stick. Don't care how Mom, please, all my friends do it. Well, you know what? Next time, when you're going to go and do something stupid, remember that if you get grounded, your friends will be out having a great time and you'll be at home reading a book.
Okay, so I'm just going to put a little spin. 10 healthy discipline strategies that work, all right?
Mm-hmm.
For anyone that's listening to this, rather than putting your hands on your child physically, which I do not recommend at all, anybody that's listening to this, your child has a right to call Childline if they feel threatened, intimidated. There was that little bit of a discussion where when Childline was first brought out, the kids used to threaten, I'm going to call Childline. And I said to you, I said, if a child is being screamed at, that's an abuse. If you can't maintain your anger yourself, you cannot expect these children to maintain that either, because they will analyze, internalize that and take it out on themselves. And that's where you've got people that end up doing self-harm, etc. And then you hear most of the people that say, oh, my parents, they do nothing but scream at me. And, as an adult, you wouldn't want another adult screaming at you either. So don't do to others that you don't want done to yourself. 10 healthy discipline strategies that work. Show and tell. Teach the child right from wrong with calm words and actions. Set limits. Give consequences. And I don't expect them to be physical. Hear them out. Give them your attention. Catch them being good. Plenty of compliments, by the way. And know when not to respond. Be prepared for trouble. Again, you're talking about tantrums, or a lot of children like to do the blackmail. Well, you did this and you did that. That again is teaching the children wrong from right. that even that behavior can be abusive. Blackmail, gaslighting. You've got to teach them nowadays what these terminologies are, because they're being used against humanity now in 2021. When it comes to the human rights, they're putting so much more restrictions on you, what you can and what you cannot say. So really, if you're going to teach children that, oh, you're shouting at me, explain exactly what that is, which is a form of an abuse. And if you are going to scream at your children, then you become the abuser. So it's vice versa, teaching them wrong from right when it comes to discipline. So, you know, show and tell, teach children right from wrong, and with calm words and actions, model behavior you would like to see in your children. Number 2, set limits, have clear and consistent rules your children can follow, and be sure to explain these rules in age-appropriate terms they can understand. Number 3, give consequences calmly and firmly. Explain the consequences if they don't behave. For example, tell her or him that if she does not pick up her toys, you will put them away for the rest of the day. Be prepared to follow through the right away, and don't give in by giving them back after a few minutes. But remember, never take away something your child truly needs, such as a meal, the things we were discussing earlier. Hear them out. Listening is important. Let your child finish the story before helping solving the problem. Watch for times when misbehavior has a pattern, like if your child is feeling jealous. Talk with your child about that rather than just giving consequences. Give them your attention. The most important, powerful tool for your effective discipline is attention, to reinforce good behavior and to discourage others. Remember, all children want their parents' attentions. Catch them being good. Children need to know when they're doing something bad and when they're doing something good. Notice good behavior and point it out, praising success and good tries. Be specific. For example, wow, you did a good job putting that toy away, or cleaning up your room, or thank you for the help. You know, it really does help me. Explain how it feels emotionally when, you know, something is going really good, you know. Number 7, knowing when not to respond. As long as a child isn't doing something dangerous and gets plenty of attention for good behavior, ignoring bad behavior can be an effective way of stopping it. Ignoring bad behavior can also teach children natural consequences of their actions. For example, if your child keeps dropping her cookies or on purpose, she will soon have no more cookies left to eat. If she throws and breaks her toys, she will not be able to play with it. It will not be long before she learns not to drop the cookies and play carefully with her toys. Number 8, be prepared for trouble. Plan ahead for situations when your child might have trouble behaving. Prepare them for upcoming activities and how you want them to behave. Number 9, redirect bad behavior. Sometimes children misbehave because they are bored or they don't know any better. Find something else for your child to do. Number 10, call a timeout. A timeout can be especially useful with specific rules when specific rules are broken. This discipline tool works best by warning children they will get a timeout if they don't stop, reminding them when they did wrong in a few words, and with little emotion as possible, and removing them from the situation for preset length of time. 1 minute per year of age is a good rule of thumb. With children who are at least 3 years old, you can try letting the children lead their own timeout. Instead of setting timer, you can just say, go to timeout and come back when you're feeling ready and in control. This strategy will help a child learn to practice self-management skills, and it also works well for older children and teens. So there's a few healthy tips there. I think what I always say that, you know, some mums, they just get up in the morning, or parents, should I say, I'm not going to put it on mothers, get the child ready for school, and they're all rush, and they're just walking to school. Play a game of I Spy on the way to school. Take some distraction with you on the way to school, something where you can learn, like spot the color or who does that. Do a reward system. You know, if they're going shopping, give them half the shopping list. You take some of the shopping list, and make it fun. You know, just there's plenty of ideas that can come into the equation of being occupied. A lot of people, they just, hello mum, hello dad, hi, and then the child's gone upstairs and they're on their phone or computer, and there's no interaction apart from dinner at the table, and then they're gone again. I will say, when for me as a rule of thumb, when I've got my grandchildren, I don't want to be on my phone. I want to embrace that time with them before they go to bed, because they're only young once, and they grow up so fast. So for me, technology, if you can put that and discipline that down, and teach the value of human interaction is more important than technology, that would be more beneficial as well. Thank you, Mr. Guest, for explaining your history, your background, and the struggles, the tries, the success. Well, finally, I think that when they've reached the 18 margin, your work is done. But that's what you think. You never stop being a parent.
Oh, no, of course not.
You never stop looking for guidance. But really and truly, you no longer really have any.
What little control you had evaporates at 18. Yeah, so
but we do want to see our children when they get to 18. We still want to have the bonds, but we've got to recognize that once they're 18 years old, they are no longer a child, they are an adult.
Yeah.
So respect all the way around. Please keep your hands to yourself. I say to people, you have a right to be free from harm, free from abuse. Know to recognize that the discipline you might have learned from your parents may not be appropriate in 2021. Got to find a better way of talking and explaining without harm. Thank you very, very, very much. Hold on a second. And we're still on YouTube, so please like and subscribe, and join us on Facebook, the Mom Project, Suicide Prevention, Mental Health Awareness, Real Talk. That is a group for all to raise awareness. Please do read the rules and regulations before you enter in. We're here to raise awareness, not raise our hands on one another.